All right, Jeremy, good to see you, man. How are things here at the Combine? What is your goal when you get here? What kind of information are you trying to acquire?
Yeah, so my goal for the Combine really is very free agency heavy. I do a lot of free agency coverage. Starting on Sunday, I'll have a huge notebook with my colleague Dan Graziano. We'll put together everything we've heard throughout the week. We'll throw it in a big bin and put it out to the world. Really just trying to put together potential signings, markets, potential trades. I mean, the Matthew Stafford story has dominated this week. It's sort of the domino that everybody's waiting for to fall. And then the rest of the quarterback pieces, I think, will fall into place. The Sam Darnolds, the Justin Fields type players, et cetera. So it's partly trying to put the pieces together league-wide of what's going to go on. It's partly taking hundreds of free agents and trying to map out how they're going to be tiered by their position and what they're going to get paid and who's going to pay them. And it's sort of a moving target of hundreds of players and teams and acquisitions. So it's pretty daunting, but it's fun too.
Describe like your day-to-day. Like obviously, a lot of these events, there's a lot of networking, there's a lot of conversations that happen sort of off the record. Describe to folks like what a reporter's week is like when you come to the Combine. It's not a 9 to 5.
It's not a 9 to 5, especially here. It's just a unique existence because you're not sleeping a whole lot, but you're kind of running on adrenaline, but you're getting your steps in. You're walking all over the city because you have meetings at various places. So, I'll try to set up meetings with people with teams, with, agents I have a relationship with, just people that are in and about the league and around it. I'll have usually dinner. I try to catch up with media colleagues and people I work with at ESPN, kind of in a dinner setting. Typically that's the case. So, you're having coffees here and there. Sometimes you might go and stand on the second floor of the JW Marriott where there's a lot of action, and you can sit there and open up your laptop and get some work done, and people that you would like to talk to are walking right by you a lot of times, so you can stop. And it's just sort of a free-flowing high school hallway. It's kind of, it reminds me of high school, honestly.
Because very much.
Yeah, you're just seeing people hey, what's up? Oh, hey, man, no, can you talk a second? And it's a lot of that.
Yeah, Senior Bowl is like that. SEC Media Days is kind of like that. It's about the relationships and how you acquire some of that information. The question is, how do you parse out how real something is? There's lots of information floating around. How do you parse out when you know and trust something is a good tip versus smokescreen?
Yeah, free agency there's some smoke for sure, and everybody wants to project their players having interest, or teams can maybe suppress the player's market a little bit. Team's value on a player is more conservative, or the player wants a higher number, and then they probably end up meeting in the middle. You really just try to rely on your instincts and rely on people you can trust. Luckily I've covered the league for a long time, so I know if I talk to somebody about a specific player or a specific team situation, I know that I can trust it and go follow up on it because of that working relationship I have with that person. So it can vary, but you have to sometimes sift out, like, why am I being told this? Especially if somebody calls you, reaches out to you, and tells you something that is of note. Your antenna needs to go up, like, well, why are they telling me this, and what's the motive? And some of those things you got to sift out. But for the most part, if you trust your instincts, usually good things happen.
How does the draft tie in? Because there's two giant parallel tracks of player acquisition, equal amounts of even more smoke screen and even more false information and even more. I have found just people in front offices also trying to find out just as much information as we in the media are. How does the draft impact? How do the two interact, free agency and the draft, in this setting?
Well, I think everything's interconnected, right? So the draft pieces at, say, quarterback with Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders and how teams feel about them can inform the rest of the quarterback market that has to shape up in the next 2 weeks of free agency. So let's say Matthew Stafford stays with the Rams, then your Sam Darnold, are you an option for, say, the Titans at number 1? And does that inform what the Titans do with the number 1 pick? Do they try to trade that back, or do they take Abdul Carter, or do they take Cam Ward and let him sit for a year because they want to sign a veteran? So all that is connected, and I try to tie it all together. But I'm admittedly not as draft heavy this time of year. I'm more free agent focused, and then I'll get into more of the draft later on. I am certainly focused on what's happening at the top of the draft. But that just happens to be my sort of personal calendar. But it all certainly ties together. And most people here with teams are more excited about the draft typically than they are free agency. So, because typically free agency is a lot of like B players about to make A money. And so the draft is, you have really talented guys that cost-controlled contracts. So teams are typically more excited about the draft than say I am this time of year, because I'm kind of more focused on free agency, but they're not as excited about those players.
Is this how unique is the class of quarterbacks with Aaron Rodgers and the Derek Carr story already sort of settled? You got Kirk Cousins pseudo settled, but not really. You got Stafford with this crazy. We're not going to go into what happened here in Indianapolis about that Stafford story, but how unique is this particular group, and what are the challenges in covering that kind of movement?
It's all unique. You kind of have to just sort of apply the institutional knowledge that you have and the conversations that you've had around this week to, inform your thinking and maybe what leads to look into. Like Kirk Cousins, he's due $27 million in guarantees, 27.5. He's got another $10 million roster bonus due, and either a roster or an option bonus, but he's got another lump sum due. So you got to think that the Falcons will cut him by then if they have to, or just hope to get a late round pick for him in exchange. So, whether it's Cleveland or somebody else going after him, or the Jets, you have to know those things ahead of time and how it's going to affect the timing of his eventual path to a new team. So, but every situation's different. You got straight up free agents, like a Justin Fields, right? Do you go back to Pittsburgh, or does he sign with a team like the Jets? But right now it's so unique because all those dominoes have to sort of wait on Matthew Stafford, right? If he goes to the Giants or the Raiders, then you have sort of an avalanche of dominoes to fall at that point, and a lot of different scenarios to work through.
Yeah. What is the perception of the Tennessee Titans from the national scope? What is the view of how the organization is run, the quality of the personnel that are making decisions, Brian Callahan, just in general, what is the perception inwardly from sort of an outside perspective?
I mean, I can't say the perception has been great based on the turmoil of the last few years. There's been a lot of change. They just fired a GM after 2 years. That's never a good thing. But if the Titans felt like they had to be proactive and that it's going to lead to a stronger team in 2 to 3 years, then they feel like that had to be done. It's hard to question that too. So, but there's been a lot of upheaval and people trying to make sense of that. But I think the new brain trust they have is very well respected with Mike Borgonzi, who's been with the Chiefs 15 plus years, knows what it takes to win, knows what a good roster looks like. So there's a feeling like they have the right people. But then now you have Brian Callahan in here, who had a tough situation with a bad roster last year. And now they have a new GM, and they're not on the same timelines. That sort of is a new trend now. Like, when a GM and head coach are on different timelines, what does that mean? Because they didn't come in together. Are they really synced up? I think they can be, certainly. And Brian Callahan's a really respected coach, and I think that will all shake out. But it's interesting. They're in a inflection point, it seems like, and it's clear that they're in sort of a mini rebuild, but have to win enough to stay respectable. So it's like, what path do they take? That's why them trading back in the first pick, if they can, I think is a realistic option for them, because they just need to get more draft picks. They need more pass rushers. They're pretty empty there right now. They're going to need more in the back end. They need another guard. They clearly need a quarterback.
A lot of things.
A lot of things. Yeah.
Well, Chad Brinker's already said on the record he's the popular kid in school right now, as you mentioned the high school analogy. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Safe travels back home.
Yeah, anytime.